Hi, welcome to VerityCast. My name is Chris Tabish, and today I'm being joined by Mark Schwartz. Mark currently is the general partner at Launchpad Digital Health, which is an accelerator and venture fund in San Francisco, which is focused on growing businesses in healthcare IT. Formerly, Mark was the CFO of Fabrinet from 1999 to 2012, and very happy to have you on the show, Mark.
Well, thank you, Chris. I'm happy to be here.
So, Mark, one of the things I wanted to talk to you, you had quite an amazing ride in Fabrinet. When you started, basically the company had $0 in revenue. It had 0 employees. You grew the company to a public company, so it was a private company. You took it public to where in 2012 it was $800 million in revenues and over 7,000 employees. And I just want to make sure, quite a ride. Just want to make sure I got those facts right.
That's right. I'm not quite sure we ever during my tenure achieved $800 million in revenue, but we were certainly at $200 million a quarter the last few quarters. So annualized, it was in that range, and it was certainly north of 750.
All right, we definitely.
But yeah, you've got the right numbers.
You're definitely a finance guy, because on a rounding error, we'll give you 850 if you want. So that's quite a ride, and VerityCast is really about taking those things that real people have shown real results, how we could convey those to people listening to say, hey, how could I do something like that? Not many people have experienced a growth pattern like that and the ability to grow an idea or a concept to a public company and revenue. What are some of those things that you observed, you personally did to make it a success? And I'd really love to focus on that ride with Fabrinet and maybe share some lessons learned. What would you call out as the number one thing that was really, if you could articulate that one thing that really had an impact on your success, what would that be?
It sounds trite in a way, but I would tell you that it was the focus on the customer and customer service, and then taking that outward focus and focusing it inwardly on our employees, in a way, customer service toward the employee base.
That's interesting you say customer service, and you hear that a lot. Customer's number one, we focus on the customer. I guess what is different when you say customer services, because clearly the results speak for themselves. How did you do it differently than the lingo or the common trite, as you say? What was different about that?
Well, I think you have to hear the customer's concerns and address those concerns and make them comfortable that addressing those concerns is a major importance to you and to your business. So, for example, at Fabrinet, which is a contract manufacturer of optical communications equipment, optical automotive equipment, and some optical medical equipment, the early customers were communications companies. And building communications products for competing companies was something that the customer base, or the potential customer base, had difficulty getting their arms around. So we created this intellectual property protection policy that applied to all and covered all of their collective concerns.
And it's something that you're hitting on is that, so often I think it's, hey, customers first, and customer in that context is like, it's a big board, and anybody who buys anything from you just falls somewhere onto the board. And what you're saying is every customer is completely unique, and they have to be. If they have different IP, if they have a different engineering process, if they're creating something different, you're basically taking what they do as a company and taking that on, which you have to really understand the uniquity, if that's a word. Is that a word? All right, we're going to go with it. You have to understand the uniqueness of their going to market. And that seems to be something that, you're not setting up a 1-800 line and putting people on hold. You're really kind of understanding that strategy.
That's right, and you're building teams to understand that. And you're putting other processes in place to make certain that there are controls. So, we could talk about building the teams a little bit, because I think that's really important in how you grow a company, obviously. You can hire the best and the brightest, and frankly, that's what we're all off to do. But doing so isn't enough in and of itself. from that hiring, you hire great people, and then you have to share the vision of the company with those folks. And because if you don't, and Chris, you're a type A personality yourself, if you're given a job to do, you'll figure out a way to get it done. And when you hire good people, that's what you hire, people that will figure out a way to get the job done to the best of their abilities and to a level that meets or exceeds the customer's expectations. However, you can create disharmony within an organization if you have a number of different folks that are getting their jobs done, making certain that the customers are satisfied, but doing it in very different ways. Mm-hmm. And the teams under them are working differently. And perhaps the teams under them can be rewarded differently. They can be incentivized differently. The communication levels can be different. And ultimately, over time, that's not sustainable in a growing company. So what you need to do is you need to make sure that not only are you hiring the best and the brightest, but that you are sharing your vision and the direction of how you intend to achieve that vision with each of those folks so that they are all literally rowing in the right direction together.
How do you do that? How do you put something in place on a regular basis where people understand the vision? Because it's one thing for the executive team to have it, but not only conveying that, but also getting in the process where on a day by day, it actually becomes kind of culture and norms and they operate by the principles of those vision. What are some of the things that you did on a regular basis?
At Fabrinet, we were growing rapidly from when we started late in '99 through 2004, roughly, and as a private company still. And then we hit a couple of quarters, consecutive quarters of uncertainty. We weren't growing as fast as we had hoped and expected to be growing. And I don't recall how it came about, but we hired an HR coach to come in and interview about 120 folks from various parts of the organization, finance and engineering and quality and IT and sales, et cetera. And he came back in his report to our executive team, and he said, "You've done a great job hiring. If you look at sort of the Jack Welch scale of A, B, and C employees, where Jack might say, and as he's written, 10% of your employees might be type A employees, sort of 80% might be type B employees, the real workforce, and then there might be 5 or 10% of the employees that don't really fit into the organization, and over some period of time they are churned out of the organization for one reason or another." What this coach told us was that we had hired probably 35 or 40% of these type A employees at our organization.
Wow.
And the difficulty with that is once you've done such a great job hiring these people, you have to give them the vision and the direction, or they're going to take their life experiences, their business experiences, and how they've completed their tasks assigned to them in the past. And that's what they're going to do in this new role, unless you give them the vision and the direction for the organization. And you create a set of processes and controls that everybody can work with and understand the principles of. So we did that. And I was a believer. I was amazed at how quickly we were able to get back on the growth trajectory we had expected to be on. It took 2 or 3 quarters. But you could walk down the halls of Fabrinet in any factory, really anywhere around the world, and quiz somebody that passed you in the hall, and you'd hear the vision of the company. You'd understand the direction we were headed. And you have to make sure that you convey those principles in a way that is meaningful for everybody. And that's really leadership, I think.
So just going back to that moment, so you hired a bunch of type A, 35 to 40% were type A. Basically, you hired a bunch of gremlins, you fed them after midnight, now they're all running around crazy with their own agenda. And
that's
so
right.
You found a way, and every time I've attended a leadership meeting, the CEO or the executive staff is up there talking about their vision, but it doesn't translate necessarily, it doesn't inspire, it doesn't motivate, it doesn't get people working together. What made that different, Mark, that you were able to take that sort of stabilization period and then put that in a trajectory of growth?
Well, one thing I've seen that doesn't necessarily work is a company laying out a vision, but you don't hear about it again. It's on a wall somewhere, framed in 7 bullet points, but that's it. And so what we attempted to do, what I think we were quite successful at doing, is every presentation about a customer, every discussion about the growth plan for a customer or the trajectory of a new project for a customer, are these going to help further those objectives?
Interesting. Okay, and so you have this motivated workforce. They're connected with what you're driving from a vision. I have to ask you, especially in contract manufacturing, a lot of that work, as we all know, is putting it offshore to a lower cost sort of geography. Now, that isn't exactly motivating to the workforce who initially got it off the ground.
That's right.
Yet you had this trajectory of growth that was pretty much, if maybe it had some small, bumps in the process, but not significantly deterred. How did you go about that, keeping the motivation up, knowing that people might actually lose their jobs or get transferred, et cetera?
That was certainly part of the plan. And each time we did this, I made an effort as an executive in the company to hold what I call the town hall meeting at these locations. Because immediately upon announcement that your factory has been sold to Fabrinet, every employee in that factory had some of those same thoughts and concerns that you had just mentioned. Am I going to lose my job? How long is this factory going to be open for, et cetera? So immediately upon the announcement of a factory being acquired by Fabrinet, through the date of the closing, which might be 6 to 8 weeks following that announcement, once a week I would go and hold a town hall session, and we'd fill up the auditorium or the cafeteria or whatever the largest space was available, and I'd say, okay, let me have all your questions, and you'd hear sort of in week 1 and week 2 the types of questions you would expect to hear in that situation. My wife is pregnant, and am I still going to continue to have the same health care benefits I had with the previous company? Mm-hmm. I was expecting to get a raise in 3 months. Should I expect that that's going to happen? I was taking a vacation in August. Should I expect that I'm still going to be able to take that vacation? And every other type of question you can imagine, personal or about the interests of the company generally. And so I'd answer what I could. And where I didn't have an answer, I'd say, that's a great question. When I'm here next week, I'll have an answer for you. And I'd come back the following week and I'd answer the questions that I wasn't able to answer the previous week, and get a barrage of new questions and answer what I could, and what I couldn't, I would come back the following week. And everybody knew that this was not an ideal situation in terms of the impact it was going to have on the families and on the community, et cetera. What we tried to do is take that same sort of level of customer service I mentioned to you before, and listening to the customer and understanding the customer's needs, and turn that inward on our own employee base.
One of the things that you did is you had a frequency of communication. It sounded like it was very authentic, like, I don't know the answer, but we're going to find it out together. And it was conveying your thoughts. Here's where I'd like to take the company, and just kind of open, hey, there's Mark, just like an everyday Joe, let's go talk to him kind of culture and atmosphere.
Well, you've sort of summarized it as I would. I think the employee has to feel, in any company, your coworker has to feel like the company has their interests in mind, and certainly not blindly, but the employee needs to feel like what they're being told by the company is actually the way the company is operating, and that's really what I tried to create. I mean, I use that term thousands and thousands of times over the course of my 13 years at Fabrinet, is we have to create certainty.
Although it's a completely uncertain environment. My job is going to China, for example, but it's not, when you say it's certainty, it's not the certainty on the future of does my job look exactly the same. It's a certainty that I can go to Mark, or any executive for that matter, and I can rely on what he's telling me. And he's in my world, and he's sort of a rock that I can go to and get good information. I think that's more the certainty that you're describing. Is that accurate?
Well, I think it applies on a number of different levels, but ultimately it is the certainty that what the employee is being told, what the customer is being told, what the investor is being told is the best information available to the speaker at that moment.
Yeah. Interesting ride, and very refreshing to hear about that. It's basic core values and openness that really had a lot to do with the success. So I really appreciate you sharing the story, Mark, and looking forward, you're involved now in, like we talked about, Launchpad Digital Health, and one of the things that, can you share a little bit about what's upcoming and maybe a little bit about the company?
Sure. So what I really enjoy about Launchpad Digital Health, which is, as you mentioned before, it's an accelerator and a venture fund. So we invest in a number of companies each year. We typically, well, I shouldn't say typical because we've only had one class of investments, and we invested in 6 companies in that cohort. And applications are now open for the next group of companies, and we are likely to have what we call our finalist day on December 15th, and the finalist day will be sort of the weeding through, call it 200 businesses and business plans between October 1st and December 1st, and determining which companies we believe are investable. And so what we look for in these companies is to make sure that they're at a point in their life cycle where we're going to really be able to add value, to juice their ability to grow over the next 12 months by locating in our space. And for me, the thing that jazzes me the most about it is really mentoring these oftentimes first-time CEOs.
And as a final thought, what is that most common advice you find yourself giving to a new CEO?
Well, that's a great question, and I don't know that there is something most common, but what I try to make sure that each CEO understands is the importance that I place on this certainty in communicating with your customers and with your stakeholders, including your employees, et cetera. Don't promise what you can't deliver.
Yeah. Great advice, Mark, and such a pleasure to have you on VerityCast.
Well, thank you, Chris.
Thank you. That was really good.